process, and then also keeping balance and understanding that the same type of preparation and process that we had to get here needs to hold true. So the guys have done fantastic with that. They don't situations like this all year. They don't flinch. Big stage. Got to move, got to travel, got to do all these things. They just keep rolling, man, and that's a testament to the kind of kids they are. You bet. Hi.
So from the outside, when I look at your receivers against their secondary, battle royale, and this is really enticing.
Yeah.
As someone who's studying film all the time,
yeah,
and so on, do you find in that any high crowd?
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be a great battle. I think 2 from Michigan, obviously, is a really, really talented corner. You saw him in the Ohio State game, just matching up with Marvin Harrison Jr. and just following him around the field. So you just know the type of confidence that they have as a defense in him. I think they got some good length in the secondary at safety, guys that are rangy, can make plays on the football and, strike people. And you can just tell they're aggressive and they play hard. Well coached, they're going to be in the right spot. Tough to get them out of position because they know exactly where they need to be. So, I think it's going to be an amazing test. They're unified. Closer? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Thank you.
No worries. I got you. I would say unified. I think that their purpose, matches what our team's purpose and culture is. And so I think that's sometimes rare in a receiver room, and I realize the ball is getting spread around. Everybody's getting a little bit of love. But I do think that there can be an element where, jealousy and things like that can set in a little bit where it's hard to get guys out there when they're not satisfied with their type of incorporation into a game plan. But for our guys, they're unified. They play together. They feed off of each other. They celebrate each other's success. And I think that goes a long way with our football team. When you see star receivers that don't mind crack blocking, for a running back, that's something that to me is different than a lot of places where a guy maybe doesn't want to do that. But you see Rome Odunze, he's dying to be on a special team. He's dying to make the block to spring Dylan Johnson. And so I think they're unified and selfless. You bet. No, I was talking about receivers. See, that's my point right there.
That's perfect. So we're just talking to Troy over there. I mean, the offensive line, their progression this year, how they've sort of gelled and come together. Now, obviously, when we got the word, the way they play, just how good have they been?
Yeah, I think that when you look at the success of our season, that's one of the key components, obviously, offensively, is that they have gelled. They've overcome some injuries. Our starting center, Mateo Mele, was hurt early in the season. We lost 3 starters on the inside from a good line last year. And so I just think their ability to grow and get better and believe that they can get better. I think that sometimes players and especially offensive line units settle into just a sense of complacency that, we've been productive. We don't need to do these things. But they believe they still haven't played their best game. And, they're hoping to against Michigan on Monday night.
Not to give away any kind of game plan or anything, but Michigan, obviously, the matchup is Michigan bringing the pressure, kind of disguising that pressure. What's the key to stopping something like that?
Yeah. Communication. I think that's a key. I know that's not sexy and it's not like this really wild football term, but I think that the guys being able to communicate and be on the same page, I think that's typically where interior problems happen, especially in the A and B gap when you're not on the same page and one side of the line's going one way and the other's going the other way to oversimplify it, and all of a sudden there's an A gap open and Michael's got somebody running down into his face, and those are the things we got to minimize, and they do a great job. Coach Minter definitely dials it up with a lot of different looks, and we got to make sure that our guys are all on the same page.
Right here.
What do you think is the number one factor that has allowed Penix to take this game to another level this year?
Mike, one thing. I just think he's got this underlying just desire to be the best. And I think that, he felt like what happened last year wasn't a fluke. Like in his mind, he always felt like he was that quarterback. And so to come out and prove that he was even better than what he did last year, and that he is the best quarterback in the country, I think that he's a very driven young man. And underneath it all, his competitive nature, drives him to be the best all the time. So he really is a guy that just likes to kind of be the underdog. And people keep telling him he's, not the Heisman Trophy winner. We're not supposed to be here as a football team, and he just keeps showing up and doing it on the biggest stage.
Is there any moment you can look to this season where you kind of saw maybe, not that you didn't think he was always great, but like just kind of a different year or something different with him that he's going to be even better?
Yeah, I think that his response in the middle of the season when things got harder and people continue to give us different looks, that Mike didn't get complacent. He actually went the other way, that he really, dug in. I think that there's a really defining moment for great players where things get a little bit tough. People start to question you. You play the Wazoo game and, we're just not clicking. We don't look that great on offense. And you roll into the Pac-12 championship game and everybody's basically wrote you off like, their offense really isn't that good. Mike's not doing that great anymore. And he comes out and, shows out in the Pac-12 championship. So I think, those moments, those little lulls that you hit and how people, show up and prepare and things like that. And I just don't think Mike ever flinched. He was the same guy, showed up, just wanted to make sure he found ways to have answers for his teammates. You bet.
Outside of the schematic and sort of on-field chemistry that you and Caleb have had over all these years, what is it on a personal level that has allowed you guys to work so well together across so many stops?
Yeah, I think you kind of touched on it a little bit in that, I think when you care about each other as, people, and you talk about having, you're raising kids, you're having those kind of conversations, figuring out how to run 4 verts against the coverage is pretty simple. And I think that, for us, it's always been that there's a chemistry there because you're like-minded people, that our values align, our work ethic aligns. And so I think that when you align with people like that, in a cultural sense, then it's easy to be a professional with someone like that.
When you talk about being aligned and the history and the chemistry together, is there an origin story to how you guys became such aggressive play callers and game managers? Because you guys have done some stuff this year that I think some people would look at and say, "Wow, that took some guts."
I guess I can't really speak for Kalen, but I would say that for me, I've always coached our guys, and I think Kalen would align with this somewhat, that I just don't think you should coach guys to not lose. And to me, being offensive is just that. We should be the ones on the attack. And I think that when you're the one that knows the play, the alignment, when the ball's being snapped, all those advantages have to be incorporated with your mindset as well. When you think about ways that you want to attack people, you don't think about sitting back on your heels. Now, there's a time and a place where you have to be, make the right decisions, hold on to the football, do all those things that it takes, good teams to do. Shoot, the 3 of our best games, we had the football for over 36 minutes, and that took good decision making. But the timing piece and incorporating those shots and staying aggressive at the right moments, I think is key. But yeah, it's always been my philosophy.
It doesn't seem like the stakes of the game changes the way you guys make decisions. Like
It can't. I just think it can't. I think as soon as you do that, you become predictable. Like they won't respect you, I guess. I give a couple examples throughout the year, but there's times where we've had opportunities to take shots and do things on short yardage plays, and we don't, and we get soft coverage or something like that and get an easy first down because people get, concerned about what you're going to do.
Coach,
You bet.
Pac-12 lost the last hurrah. I feel like a lot of people feel like they're repping back right now.
Yeah.
How important is that to you?
Well, it's very important. Over the last 7 going on 8 years, I've been on the West Coast, and just seeing all the great teams and coaches and players that have come through just in my short time. I think there's certainly an emotional tie to what this conference is, and I'm just really proud of. I think we're obviously at the forefront of all this right now, but there's so many good football teams in the Pac-12 this year. And I know it wasn't always represented in bowl games, but teams like what Jonathan Smith did at Oregon State, and you could go on down the line. Those are really good, tough football teams, and I think that we were starting to do it in in a new age of, NIL, transfer portal. We had kind of already, went through that and still had come out, on top, so to speak, where we're able to compete with the best teams and conferences in the country. You bet.
Obviously, you're focused on Michigan and everything like that. But this is going to be Dylan Morris's last game. For
Yeah.
You guys. I was hoping you could just kind of describe what he means to you personally and what he means to this team as a whole.
I love Demo, and I know everybody on the team does, and I know, there's been a lot of questions surrounding, wow, the guy's transferring, he's going to do this. How can you roll into a game with him as a backup? And, I can't imagine any other way. Dylan is one of the most loyal, honest, toughest, hardest working. He's a fantastic kid and a fantastic quarterback. And so for me, I'm just really proud to see, the type of leadership that he's provided, even in these tough moments and these moments of transition where he's still the first guy in the building every day. His preparation is second to nobody. And, that I think takes a really special type of man. You bet.
Hey, Coach Grubb.
Hi.
So obviously, Sioux Falls, Kalen Moore, 97 injuries, 97
Right.
Do you feel like when Power 5, when FBS jobs will usually take something like that almost?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to, fit the profile. I think there's, I've got that question, so I've thought about it a little bit, and I think one of the things that, people think Sioux Falls to Washington, but I think that, and I don't mean that we weren't ready to do this right at Sioux Falls, but I think that there's a part that people are skipping, that there was a growth process for both Kalen and myself, between all those years, between Sioux Falls and Washington, growth that was had for Kalen, Southern Illinois, or myself at South Dakota State and Eastern Michigan and Fresno State, and there's so much exposure to, other levels of football that I think that those things happen. But I certainly think that the roots and foundation of people that have won and, won consistently can surface back up when you get the opportunity to be in the right place with the right kind of people.
How do you identify when you talk to small colleges, people who you think might be ready for that next level or might be eventually able to
my advice to young coaches or guys that are trying to climb up is, be where your feet are planted, number one. And again, I know that's cliched and it's not sexy, but it's exactly what you have to do. And I think that every time that I've got an opportunity, I guess at least me personally, I look back and I reflect after I've moved on that's what I did a great job of, is being exactly where I was and absolutely selling out to whatever my role was in that position. And I think that that's the most critical component, because I think far too often young coaches can start to daydream and think about being at Washington instead of being a really, really good O-line coach at Eastern Michigan. And that was my focus when I was there, is making this place the best it can be. So big time's where you're at. You bet.
Hey Ryan,
How we doing?
How do you see Michael handle truly becoming like a superstar this year? I mean, not just the promotions and NIL and everything.
Yeah.
The fact that he's so recognizable and he's basically kind of the face of the program.
How did he do it?
I just handle that.
Oh, I mean, Mike's my hero. Like, I can't imagine being 22, 23 and dealing with the humility that Mike has went through this process with. I mean, I think for me, it's Mike continues to grow. I think that's one of the most impressive things to me, is I think quietly he observes, and he's so good at listening. And sometimes, you even, if you don't know Mike, you can think initially he's withdrawn, when really he's just listening, he's paying attention, he's reading what's going on in the situation. And I think he does a good job of, being slow to react instead of being, reactionary and just jumping out at something. So, for me, that's one of the things that I've really just been so impressed with Mike on, is just how he sits back and waits and tries to make sure he understands before he makes this big jump or statement. And, I credit that to the foundation he has. He's got great family. I've said it, many times, that Mike Sr. and Takesha are amazing people, incredibly humble. And, Mike certainly is cut out of that cloth. Yeah, no, for sure. I think, as you go on years of coaching, I think you learn that in general, not just with star quarterbacks, but just every player in your room. I think, long gone is the days of, everybody fit into this box and do exactly this. I think that you have to, find the ways to get your message to resonate personally with each kid. And I'm not saying you have time to like sit there and have 30-minute meetings with every kid on the team every day, but I think that you have to be observant, and sit back and recognize what it is that motivates, what it is that, is special or important to those kids as men, and then your job is to help develop that and cultivate all the strengths, help them with their weaknesses. And so I certainly, with Mike, that's what I did when I saw, I guess how he just sat back and, looked and learned and, how he reacted to new people. I think says a lot about how mature he can be. Hey, how are we doing? Good.
I'm sure you can ask this, but he's with DJ. I know he's reiterated he's going to play this game, but I'm wondering, do you feel confident that he can fulfill the same kind of role that he has in the second half of the season, as involved as he's been?
Yeah, I do. I think that he's had a great week of rehab. He's able to start repping with us, and so I think that he's feeling a lot better. And I know he's a really determined young man. So I would be shocked if he wasn't able to come out there and make an impact in the game.
I wanted to ask too about Rich Newton, a guy who's kind of been in the background more in recent seasons, but he was once someone who had played a very good role here. I just wonder what kind of teammate he's been, where that's not easy for everyone to kind of accept a reduced role in some ways, and how you've seen him.
That's a great question. Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked it because I think Rich is one of the best teammates on the team, and Rich's role obviously is not, as a starter. He's on special teams. He's a backup. He helps out in short yardage situations. But I'll give you an idea of the kind of guy he is. We were down scout team defensive backs one week. I don't even remember when it was. And Rich just runs over there and jumps over and starts playing safety, and after practice, Mike actually was a little bit upset. He was like, "Hey, coach, we owe Rich more respect than that. He shouldn't be doing it." I was like, "Man, I told him not to. He wanted to do it, and that's just how he is." Rich celebrates everything, and I think Rich has known what it's like to be in that spotlight and, how special it is, and all he wants to do is celebrate his teammates and this team. So he's a special kid. Yep.
Actually, I'm sorry, one second.
You bet. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hey, Coach.
Hey.
I want to ask, Michigan's defensive line rotates a lot of guys in and out using rally groups, and you have to really just study a lot more guys, maybe just the front five. Have you seen that from a different team this season, and how do you prepare for a team that just rotates so many guys in and out of each game?
Yeah, really. There isn't many defensive lines we've played that don't do that. To be honest with you, I didn't feel like their rotational scheme was any more significant than most of the teams we played. Some people probably hang a little bit harder on their ones. They'll certainly rotate their 4D tackles quite a bit. But no, they got great depth. They do a great job of utilizing that for sure and rotating those guys in and out. But no, I didn't feel like it was a issue as far as breaking it down. You bet.
Was talking about when you guys took your first look at the offensive line in winter condition, like, whoa, these guys are pretty athletic, pretty good.
Yeah.
With all your first impressions and kind of what's made them such a cohesive group.
Yeah, I thought, two parts to that. Number one, I totally agree with Kalen's sentiment on that, one of the things that both when we watch workouts and when I watch film, I felt the best probably about the offensive line unit. That they had a ton of potential, and I could go over my notes over and over of what I thought when I got there. I think it also, part two, speaks to exactly why we kept Scott Huff. And when I came in there, I was like, what happened in 2021? These guys are great. They're all back. Like, what in the world, with the exception of their center, Luke Wattenberg. I was just really surprised that there wasn't more production. So I went back and watched a ton of film on Coach Huff's work years prior to that, and just what a great job he did, and how good his unit performed. And so then, just took the time to sit down and get to know Scott a little bit. And, we knew some of the same people. He actually played college football with our running back coach, Lee Marks. And so there was a lot of commonality with Scott. And I just felt like, once we sat back and started really recognizing the level of talent that Coach Huff had recruited, because if you look at the last 2 years, all of our starters, all of our players on the offensive line were guys that Coach Huff recruited. There are no transfers. So those guys are all homegrown, and I think that speaks a lot to the type of room that Huffy is, put together.
Ryan.
Kind of going off that, loss we made obviously on what the defensive front did last week. Is it fair to say this is a different test than you've seen all season up front?
I think collectively, Texas's front and what they did was really good. I think potentially scheme-wise, there's more challenges that Michigan will present than maybe Texas, as far as just volume of scheme. There's a little bit more there, but they're a really good unit. They play really hard. I thought, as far as physicality, them and Texas are very close. I thought maybe the interior of Texas and Michigan is very comparable. Really, really good players. Yep.
Thanks, Coach, for your time.
Yeah.
What stands out most about Michael Penix's leadership, both on and off the field, and what stands out most about him as a person?
Yeah, I think, as a person, number one, I would say, and it kind of parlays into his leadership, is Mike's humility. I think there'd be a lot of guys that would be in Mike's situation that, you would struggle to relate to them in a meeting room, or, they're on such a big stage that it's hard for them to relate to teammates, but that's exactly the opposite. Mike's the guy that can still joke around with a scout team guy, or, just is a very personable, relatable guy. I think that's what makes him a great teammate. When Mike last year, when it was fall camp and he won the starting quarterback job, because he didn't get named starting quarterback till about a week and a half, 2 weeks before the first game, and we took a captain's vote, and Mike got like 105 out of 110 votes. And I think that just speaks to, when Mike got there in the winter, he didn't try to stand out front. He tried to lead. He tried to, this is who I'm going to be that same guy consistently. And I think that is what he's done. And that's allowed him to really create genuine relationships with his teammates. You bet.
Your offense with all the wrinkles, do you still consider it air raid variation?
No.
And if you could take the label off, how would you describe it?
I want to officially make sure I take that label off. We are not an air raid offense. We lead the country in passing, but we are not an air raid offense. So I hear that, and I don't know necessarily where that comes from, because if you're watching our scheme, I think you're seeing different complexities, and the number of wrinkles and pass progressions that our quarterbacks have to go through are very different than what an air raid quarterback would have to do. I'm passionate about that one. I'm sorry.
Back to pass.
This may oversimplify this, but
Yeah.
is it tempting to just call shot plays all the time because of the personality?
I think you learn those things over time as a play caller. Yes, of course it is. But there's no 14-point plays, and I think you got to remember that sometimes those plays happen because of your patience and your diligence to a game plan. So, always seems probably on those really good games super easy to people watching the game, but there's a lot of thought and process and planning into when those plays happen and what you have to see defensively from a schematic piece that starts to present to people, and you're seeing, okay, this has happened, now I can do this. And so sometimes it takes longer in games than other times.
I wanted to follow up and just
Yeah.
ask you simply, how do you see it, and how does it continue to evolve?
See the offense. When you say see it, are you saying what's the style, or? Okay, I would say if you're going to label it, I'd probably say a pro style spread. And when you think of terms of quarterback play, that's where I always start, is that our guys have to be in a position to truly be comfortable in pro style progressions. So complex reads, 1 through 5 on the progression all the way through, things like that. Not just flood shots on deep balls and things like that, or not just quick game tempo plays. So, but I also think that our ability to move in and out of tempo and the shifts and motions are one of the things that make us unique, and one of the things that we pride ourselves on. I think that even in the last 6 to 7 years is for defensive play callers. They're picture callers, right? They're seeing pictures. So the best we can do to change those pictures for them and the kids makes things a little bit tougher on them. And sometimes you got to remember you're playing the kids, not the coordinator. And so if that picture changes for them, it'll make it a lot harder for them to make the call that they've been given. You bet.
Ryan, how common is what you guys do in that straight line downfield passing? It's like a philosophy. I'm just asking.
Yeah. I think everybody has some form of, trying to stretch the field vertically. I think one of the complexities, or what I think that we do a good job of, as far as like when I talk quarterback play and thinking about how guys work, is that you want to be in a situation where you have to absolutely tell the guys, like, we got to find ways to stay on the field and at the same time stay wildly aggressive. And I think that the elite part of an offense, when you're really humming, is you're living somewhere right in that gray area. That, you have the ability to make the right decisions, the right reads, the right calls to stay on the field and keep yourself viable, while at the same time getting the ball down the field, because there's obviously an inefficiency that goes with those shot plays and things like that, just as far as the number that you're going to complete. So I think that, when we're playing our best, you look at the Texas game and you're holding the football for almost 36 minutes and your quarterback's throwing for 430 yards, and you start thinking about that. Your leading rusher was only 21 carries for 49 yards, but somehow you had the ball for 36 minutes. So there's a piece to that I think is really hard to replicate, and there's a discipline that goes with that.
What did you do? None of us have any idea who you had at Sioux Falls. But who was your quarterback? Did you do it there?
Well, back when Kayla and I were together in 7 and 8, or excuse me, 8 and 9, when we won back-to-back national championships, our quarterback was Lorenzo Brown. So Lorenzo Brown was a true dual threat guy. Like I think he threw for 40 touchdowns and ran for another 20. I mean, he was bananas. He was a really, really good player. If he was 5'11", he might have been somewhere else, but he wasn't even that. So, but I think that's one of the things, people have asked me, what are some of the benefits to being at a smaller school and things like that. Being at a place like Sioux Falls helps you build with what you have and make the best out of what you have, and the creativity can come out of that. And so there was still a lot of vertical passing game for sure, but we still had some quarterback runs that I don't really do with Michael because I'm not trying to get him hit. But that part, I think that there's certainly some of the aspects that you see from our offense now were relevant back then as well.
Real quick, Troy talked about this countdown clock, whatever it is. Each day is 161 days. Is that you, or how did that come about?
Yeah, that was the first day of fall camp. I put a slide up, and the slide was our vision as an offense or a team. But our vision was a national championship. And so the stressing points there that I had made to the offensive unit was, far too often I think you get scared as a coach or just even as a person to think about what's possible. People talk more in terms of what's probable. And so I think it was very probable for us to compete or maybe even win a Pac-12 championship. But what was possible, the vision, was national championship. So every meeting, it was the same slide. It was the national championship trophy. And the first day of camp, when I put that slide up, I showed it to him the other day. It said 161 days to Houston. Can you have yourself built for that? And so now we're at a couple days, and here we are in Houston. So every weekend on Sunday when I'd meet with the offense, I'd show them the slide, and 7 days would tick off of there, and again, here we are. But that's a credit to the guys to buy into that. And I think a big part of that was on that slide off to the left, I had some information about the 1990 Huskies team. So I think they had 1 or 2 losses. They had a really good team. They ended up top 10 in the country, very similar to what we did in 2022. Top 10, 2 losses, really good team. A lot of the components were coming back on the 91 championship team for the Huskies. Very similar to what we were doing. So I'm giving you a long story here, but I got this pin from this one donor, and it said, "Hungrier than ever." And this pin was from the 91 championship team in between 90 and 91. So the thought was, we got to stay hungrier than ever. So, I had the picture of this pin, and that pin's sitting right in front of my computer back in Washington and Seattle. It's been there all year. And so just getting the guys fixated on truly what's possible instead of falling and, kind of being conservative. And I'd met with Coach Peterson, who I consider a mentor and is just an absolute stud. And it was like the day before fall camp, and I was telling him, like, man, I'm really leaning towards telling the guys, like, let's go for a national championship. That's what's possible. And he even said, he was like, I don't know. You do that, and then you got to retract if you lose. And I was like, screw it, we're going for it. So it's like 4th and 1 in the Apple Cup. You got to go get it, right? You bet.
Michael, you had a large body of work for you to evaluate. To what extent has it surprised you what he's done these last 2 years?
I don't think there's been any surprise as far as like what Michael was capable of. I think that we all believe that he was certainly able to do those things, and also believe that physically he had the tools to accomplish all those things. So I think that if there's anything that surprised me, it surprised me that this hadn't happened earlier in his career, and it was really simply just because of injuries, and maybe just not being totally utilized like he is at Washington.
Willie Sanchez was telling me that Kale used to have a chart in his office that laid out step by step what you guys are going to accomplish at the Sioux Falls. Is that accurate?
Yeah, we had every year Kalen would do kind of a pyramid deal of what we had to get done and what our expectations were for the season. I can't remember what those all were exactly. I remember one year we were actually really good running the ball, and so one of our goals was going to be plus 100 in the running game, which people would probably think is crazy now with our offense, but we did it, and that was something. So we always had to we had to outrush the other team by 100 yards, and I think that was 2008. We were really good running the ball.
You mentioned Lorenzo Brown. He's still getting it done in the Indoor League.
Yeah. Zoe played forever. I think he's like 90 years old and still slinging it out there.
My real question for you was just, this team has so much experience. You got both teams really. But when you look at what it's like to coach a team like yours, that has so much experience, how's that different than when you're coaching another team that doesn't have quite as much? How much help you guys in all these clubs going?
Well, I think that, from a preparation standpoint, your saturation point is much higher, meaning what you can input to players like that have experience. You can push them a lot further, and when you can do that, I think the game plan can be a little wider and put a little bit more pressure on the defense. So I certainly think that is attributed to part of our success this year. Absolutely, and those guys, everything's repetition. So when you think about being in those moments, it never felt too big, and the guys are used to making the biggest play on the biggest moment. You bet. What's that?
You mentioned the pin, hungrier than ever.
Oh, man, I think his name was Culpepper. Barry Culpepper, maybe. We do a thing, it's called Dogs in the Desert, and our donors put it on, and we go there, and we go to Miss Ann from Nordstrom's puts it on, and this guy was handing these pins out, and he gave me like 40 of them, and so it was pretty cool. And he gave me the whole backstory on. I was like, yeah, that's kind of applicable. Yeah.
Off topic, Michael, just what has this journey been like the last couple of years, and what would you say,
where's he grown the most? For Mike, I think just the most inspirational part about Mike is his resiliency when you know his story, and when you think about how he didn't flinch through this entire process, and once he got in a position that he was in Washington and started getting the success, I think one of the things that's awesome about Mike was he didn't change. There wasn't like this drastically different kid showing up in my meeting room. It was like, yeah, that's Mike. That's exactly who he's going to be, and he's going to wear the same crappy flip-flops, and it's going to be Mike. And so I admire that about him. And then as far as the growth part, I think everything. I think that Mike is such an aware person that he takes things in. He thinks about them. He doesn't react too quickly. And that's what I've seen is just, his growth in just being mature in the position that he's in. I think is impressive when you think about being 22 and 23 years old and being in that kind of spotlight. Just, when I went to the Heisman ceremony with him, it was one of the few times during the season where I didn't have that much to do. I was like just kind of sitting back, watching Mike, just talking to people, and I was in awe of him, just watching him operate, and just how he took everything in. Because I wouldn't say Mike's necessarily the guy trying to go be out front of everything. It's really not who he is. But when he has to and there's people there, he's fantastic. Yep.
When I talk to some defensive play callers, they talk about how unconventional you are calling the game and how no tendencies with you. Is that something you work on or try to develop?
Did Minter say that? I was hoping. Dang it. Yeah, you certainly don't want to be the guy that's predictable. I think that you don't want to fight it so hard that you don't get good at the things that you want to be good at and have some DNA that you can fall back on every week in your offense. But I certainly think there's things that you have to evaluate on a weekly basis on self-scout to make sure that you're not just giving it away. And those are the balances and the concessions you have to make, is consistency and confidence in, hey, this is who we are, this is what we do, and then changing it up enough to keep the defense off balance.
What are some places that you pull from, especially to develop some of these unique motions and shifts that you guys do?
Oh, anywhere. Anybody that's doing something cool, we're going to find it. That's the beauty of now. We joke about it all the time with how much access we have to film. It's almost like who's scoring points, who's doing what, whether it's the Dolphins with a new motion with Tyreek Hill or whoever it might be with a good shift that we thought, gained an advantage, whether it be for communication of the defense or leverage on a defender. We're constantly looking for anybody. You bet. Thank you.
So, Coach, are there any players that you guys have identified on film that might be a problem on Michigan's defense?
I think Tua is a really good player. Their corner, I think that he's very consistent, and for a sophomore, I think he plays with a lot of savvy and physicality. 78, their interior D tackle, I think is a fantastic interior D lineman, athletic, powerful, plays with good leverage, good hands. And then 25, their inside linebacker, 6'3", 247. Runs really, really well and has a ton of football savvy and experience. I think he's a really good player as well.
So Michigan has a team that has the fewest penalties per game in the nation. How do you scheme around such a disciplined team like that, and how do you make defense play for them?
Well, we've already talked to the officials, and they said they don't like Harbaugh, so I think we're in good shape. No, I'm kidding. I think you have to tip your hat to them. Like, they're a very disciplined team. And they've done a great job with that, and I think that that's something that you got to really, recognize when you go into it, is that, hey, these guys aren't going to stub their toe and make the big mistake. They're going to be disciplined, which really just puts the onus back on you, that you have to understand, hey, we've got to execute at a high level. We can't be giving free yards to this team.
We're talking about that unconventional scheming and the amount of motions that you guys do. Are those ways that you can get those guys off sides or any penalties, trying to throw them off?
I sure hope so. Sure hope so.
This is going to sound like a stupid question.
No.
I'm pretty sure.
I'm ready.
How important are exterior playmakers in this era of college football? Maybe
Yeah, I think that in more ways than one, I think that, those guys, when you can get the ball on the perimeter and people play a little bit more loose, and they give you space, you take advantage of space. If they want to take the space away and they want to man you up, and you feel like your ball skills are better than their ball skills defensively, then you can still attack them. So I think that, guys like Roma Dunze and Jalen Polk and Jalen McMillan are worth their weight in gold.
I was going to say, is that something, or having playmakers like that at the quarterback that can have a way to close the gap against talent? Like, not necessarily in Washington, but...
No, I think that's a great observation. I think that even back to, people talk a lot about the Sioux Falls days with Kalen and things like that. I think that there was definitely times and years where we didn't have great fronts. Our offensive line wasn't that great, so finding ways to be creative and get the ball, whether it be in space, on the perimeter, and one-on-one shots was something that, I've coached for a long time, just trying to find ways to spotlight good players with the football. You bet. What's your name? What's up, man? How you doing, Pete?
It's weird to talk to someone with a microphone when they're as your season went on and you hit that offensive lull in the middle of the year, it almost felt like you had to form two identities that eventually reunited in one. Does that make sense? Talk me through a little bit of what you learned about your offense as you went through Arizona State, Stanford, and in those kinds of games. And Dylan was sort of one of the, I think, revelations that emerged.
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, when you look at it every week, I think if you're honest and you're a little bit ego-free, when you go back through a game plan and you look at like, man, we really left some meat on the bone right here, and we could have attacked this a little bit more and found a better way to utilize DJ, or hey, this matchup was actually better than we thought. And then you couple those and you match those things up, one game at a time, and all of a sudden you build, a couple packages together, and you keep learning more about the identity of your offense, I think, every year as you go. And for us, I think that it spoke a lot to the front. On our front, we lost 3 starters from last year. We had multiple injuries early on, guys in and out. And so once that started to settle, then we recognized more what that unit was and what they were capable of. I think that, we were able to find a few different ways to attack some of those things.
So I'm sure you've been asked about this, but Dylan, obviously, in his status as a big starter,
yeah.
out of here, do you feel like you'll be able to use him at full throttle?
I do. And he's done a great job last couple of days where, really we were more worried about his foot initially, and now he's really feeling good. Yesterday he was able to get out there and move around, and so I think today he'll take another step at practice, and I feel like I don't think he's going to be limited, honestly. I think he's going to be just fine. You bet. Great to see you. You bet. Hey, how we doing?
After the Texas game, Rome talked about that you had brought up the 91 team with them and kind of the 90 season building off of that. Why is it important to kind of look back at a team like that and take whatever you can?
Yeah, so there was a donor that had given me this pin. We had went to Dogs in the Desert. It was an event that some of our donors put on for the coaches, and he gave me a pin from the 91 national championship team. It said "Hungrier Than Ever," and so the pin was representing between the 90 and 91 season. So in the 90 season, the Huskies were really good. I think they were a top 10 team in the country. A lot of similarities between the 90 team and our 2022 team. And so, I kind of just was like, yeah, this is us, going from 22 to 23. So going into the 91 season, they were hungrier than ever. And so we talked a lot about that, hey, they went out with a lot of guys coming back, and, they felt like national title or bust. And so early on, I just recognized that and, went with it. And so that was kind of what our vision was set at the beginning of the season right away every single time. So I'd put the same slide up every week for the offense, and it was a countdown from 161 days to Houston. And I showed them that slide the other day from the beginning of fall camp, and I was like, this is where it started. Process has to be the same, practice has to be the same. And so their consistency in big games, I think, also comes from the consistency in their preparation and their vision, and their actions matching up. Because for us, that was something I told a couple other people earlier, was just when we were attacking it early on, I just told the guys, as a person, I always felt like people typically they'll prepare themselves for what's probable, right? Like, it's probable they're going to compete for a Pac-12 championship and be really, really good, but what's possible is a national championship. And so when you raise the bar up here, they'll climb higher. They just will, and that's exactly what they did.
So who was in the meeting with the slide?
Me. So it was beginning of fall camp. I have the full offensive unit in. So every week during the season, I meet with the offense. Well, to kick off the season, I put it up, and we talk about, like, this is the vision. And so for us, we don't necessarily work off of goals. We talk about key objectives that have to add up every day in practice that will equate to success in games. But what's the overlying theme, the vision of that, was a national championship. And so every week from then on afterwards, I'd meet with the offense. I would remind them what the vision is, and then we talk about the key objectives to get to that. And those were the things that we just zeroed in on every week, and the message never changed.
So did you have a countdown slide?
Yeah.
What was that?
Whatever, I told them it was 6 days or whatever day it was. I can't even remember that I met with them. But yeah, it was like, hey, it was 161. And I actually showed them that slide and just circled the 161. And I'm like, and now it's 6. And that's it.
You brought up Will Johnson earlier, number 2 for Michigan.
Yeah.
A cornerback like that, what's the approach? Do you throw away from him? Do you go
No.
right at him? What's the approach?
Yeah, I think you have to trust your playmakers. I think you also have to be, observant, thinking about the things that, hey, there is a possibility if we get our best guy on one of their other guys, that's good for us too. But at that time, you just don't ever want Mike to think, man, we can't ever throw at this guy, because obviously people have completed balls on him and things like that. But you have to respect what kind of player he is. Just like anytime you play a good player, you don't want to ignore it, but at the same time, you don't want to back away from it.
How do you describe stylistically what Michigan wants to do on the back end?
Multiple. I think they do a really good job. They disguise their coverages really well. I think Coach is super creative in the pictures that he tries to create for the quarterback, and I think that some of his NFL, experience shows through with that. You bet.
Now, Ryan Grubb, Coach,
Yeah.
you're in the offseason and fall camp. At what point did you start looking around this room, the offensive line, Pat Michael back there, all those wide receivers, this is going to be something special?
I think right away, in the winter and even in spring ball, and I think when it really hit, honestly, was in spring ball. When we got out there and just seeing and thinking about what the difference was, how they operated just one spring before that, 1 year before that, what we looked like, and then how aggressive I could be with the install and how fast they were retaining information. And, oh, you know what, hey, you guys got this down, your saturation point is much higher, let's do this, this, and this. So I just think it allows you to be so much more aggressive when you have guys like that. But I knew at the end of spring that we had a chance to be pretty special.
Part of this is the chemistry of the offensive line.
For sure.
Even when they play against defenses that are more physical, what has it been about that work together that's making you guys?
Every good offensive line from the beginning of time is a unified front. I know that's cliched, but I think that their communication style and how they really truly understand how to work together and feed off of each other, and just low ego, high output. That unit has done that all year, and just their ability to step up when they need to from an injury, and 3 key losses on the inside from last year, 3 starters, and just their growth. I think that their ability to grow throughout the season and get better and believe that they haven't played their best game is unique to guys. I think some guys just are trying to survive and they think, hey, we're undefeated, we're doing good enough. But I think there's a preparation piece to guys like Troy that really want to be their best no matter what.
I appreciate the time you had.
What's that?
I appreciate the time.
You bet. Thank you. Hi. Yeah.
What you were talking about a little while ago, just the raised expectations and competing in national competition. I mean, the way college football is set up, one loss, that could ruin those hopes.
Right.
So, I guess what I wanted to ask you was just how with all that, you guys have gotten really tight. Games for the safety season.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that that's a great question, because that can be tricky for sure. I think that there's a piece that culturally that you want to have on offense where you want to demand details and discipline, but at the same time you have to create a sense of freedom within the players that it's okay to make a mistake. If they don't ever feel like they can make a mistake, then they start playing tight, and there's things that I think can transcend and carry over into games when you're so. It doesn't mean that you're just all laissez-faire with details, like, oh, it doesn't matter, but you have to like challenge guys, like to push the edges of what they're capable of doing, and then when they don't do it or they mess up, it's like, hey, that's okay. We'll either find a better way to attack it, or we'll change this motion, or whatever you need to do. And I think that when the players really sense and feel that there's a collaborative effort with how your style of coaching and things like that they feel like, man, this guy's in it with me. Like I want this, I want to find a way to help you make this happen on Saturday. And then guys they play with a sense of freedom that they can go attack it and be their best. Oh, yeah. No, Jalen certainly he brings another element. He's one of the better slot receivers, if not the best slot receiver in the country. I think that when you match him up on nickels and safeties and things like that, that can be a mismatch in space. I think he's unique in that he's a great option route runner. He can break you down and run away from you and separate, but he can take you deep as well. But he's a super talented kid and just, ton of fun to coach. Thank you. Yep. There's the real guys right there. Look at those savages. Come on. What's up? Can you identify yourself, sir?
My name is Nathaniel.
Okay.
I was wondering, what do you think about the Washington offensive line?
Oh, I think they're the most disciplined, toughest, biggest heart. I love those dudes. They're the best, man. And they're gonna ball out on Monday. I love you too, bud.
Now give us the real answer. Brian, I grew up on small college campuses. I've been talking to all the guys on your staff. So many of them, all of them came from, granted it's
Right.
wherever, but what does it say to all the coaches out there trying in Division II, FCS? What's the message to see you guys on this stage?
Be where your feet are at. Be the best you can be right where you're at. And I wish I had a lot cooler thing to tell you, but it is so true. I said this earlier, but every opportunity I've ever gotten is because I was doing a great job right where I was at. Fresno State would have never happened if I wasn't focused on being the best offensive line coach I could be at Eastern Michigan. And Washington would have never happened if I wasn't being the best offensive coordinator and quarterback coach at Fresno State that I could be. And so I think that, guys far too often look ahead. And, if I was dreaming about being the offensive coordinator at Washington when I was at Eastern Michigan, well then K-John Armstrong wouldn't have been a very good guard at Eastern Michigan. And Andrew Wiley, who's now an awesome player out at the Washington Commanders, wouldn't have been a good tackle at Eastern Michigan. And I think it's so true, but it's really hard to do. It's a lot easier said than done. That you can daydream for just a second, but you got to bring it right back and get back to work where you're at.
Does it feel the same? I'm asking these guys, getting on the bus.
Yeah.
The same as it did, when you were grinding.
There's so many parts. There's more parts that do than what don't, and I'll say it that way. Like there's so many parts I think that are the same. The hugs in the locker room afterwards, the feeling you get when you scheme one up and they hit it and Michael makes a perfect throw. I think that part is very, very much the same. I think there's other parts that, events like this and, these are obviously major differences. And then just some of the, I think, the recruiting pieces and things like that are different. But, man, there's so many things that I think feel identical. Football's football. Thank you.
I wanted to ask about Roman a little bit. When you watch him, the catch point, body control, or the way he tracks the ball, and he seems so multifaceted in skills. In your opinion, what is his best physical trait?
His heart. His heart. He is so tough. He loves football, and he might be the smartest receiver I've ever coached. But if I'm talking pure skill, I think the improvement he's made from year 1 to year 2 in his ball compete skills is phenomenal. He was really good in 22. This year, I think he might be the best in the country, right? He's done some things in the biggest stages at the biggest moments, and I think that's what's going to continue to separate him.
Washington media session. 5 minutes remaining.
I was talking to Coach Shep earlier. He said when he got his draft grade back last year, that was a question that the teams had. Contested catches, and then you turn on the tape this year.
You're like, that's all he does is contested catches. That's right. But I think that speaks volumes to who Rome is too. When you think about, some guys would get kind of butthurt and why would you? Rome just like, it's back to the lab, time to get to work. I do need to get better at that, and I think that he's just a really selfless, humble kid that wants to be the best version of himself.
How does he balance? As Jamarcus mentioned, he's got a fiery leadership style, but he also knows when to have fun. What have you seen from him when he's with his guys?
Man, he is such a cool. I wish I was like 1% as cool as Roma Dunze. That guy is amazing. I don't know. He's just got this calmness about him. But then, like, when the Savage needs to come out and compete, he's ready. And all of his teammates know that. But he has been the same guy since day one when I've gotten here, and just consistent, really, really, really low ego, smart, emotionally intelligent, like can handle moments. He's every NFL guy that asks me, I'm like, that's a 10-year pro if I've ever seen one.